Hey folks, welcome to the stream. I'm hoping that everything's working okay. In true technology fashion, had a bunch of challenges before I started the stream today. So I'm hoping it's working. Thanks for joining me, and we're gonna hop right in. I'm gonna keep this to an hour today. We're gonna see how much we can get done. And I thought we took July off, so I thought we'd kind of ease back into it and change the stream up a little bit and do some midday streams rather than evening streams. And today we're going to build out a really simple CloudFormation template that can be used for launch templates. So if you're not familiar with launch templates are a way to, let's delete this so we don't get confused. Launch templates are a way to simplify the deployment of EC2 instances. So actually, before we look at the template, let's go over here, right? So you can see I had a little demo machine. And if I do launch instance, right, you can see there's a lot of things that we have to select. And if we open up advanced details, you've got a lot of things here. So you can imagine, if you're building through something through the console, that can be challenging, a lot of opportunities to make mistakes. But even if you're using, infrastructure as code, CloudFormation or something else, there's a lot of opportunity here to select the wrong things. So launch templates are a way to simplify this by pre-populating, is the word that I like to use, a bunch of options. And what's really interesting about launch templates is that they can be used for a bunch of different solutions. So the precursor to a launch template was a launch configuration, and they were unitaskers, right? To borrow a term from Alton Brown, they were purpose built for autoscaling groups. The interesting thing about a launch config is it's also immutable, meaning once you create it, you can't change it. So what a launch template does is it supports other offerings outside of the autoscaling group. So we can use a launch template through the management console to deploy something. We can use a launch template programmatically to launch an EC2 instance or a fleet of EC2 instances, and it supports autoscaling groups. So it's a multitasker, right? Which is always good. And then on top of that, it is mutable, I guess. It's version controlled. So we're able to have multiple versions of a template. That's why it's really important. We use them all the time, whether it's auto scaling, whether it's just building out a deployment process for a customer to simplify some of the options that they have to select. So I thought this would be a good way to get back into the stream here and build out something that I think is useful for regardless of what it is that you're trying to do. EC2 based applications, but yeah, it's quite versatile. Okay. Let me open up the CloudFormation launch template, and you'll notice here that we've got a lot of options to select from. So if we go here and we're going to write in YAML, so we'll filter this out. Looks pretty basic, right? Where it gets really powerful is in the launch template data section here. So if we open this up, you can see all the options we have. And essentially all of these attributes are what were in the console there. Not all of them are required, but depending on what it is that you're trying to do, you've got some flexibility here. So I say we'll start with a launch template, but there's a lot of offshoots of a launch template. Like I can see some things right away. What's the instance profile? So do we want to associate an IAM role with the EC2 instance? What is the EC2 key pair? There's security groups. So there's some other supporting things that we'll most likely need to create. Whether we get to all of those today or not, we'll see how we go. Okay, so let's dive right in. I've got my editor opened up over here already, and you can see I've got kind of a base CI script. We're going to continue to use CI scripts to do these deploys, and we're going to deploy them into our little demo account. Okay. So let's create our YAML file, and I just called it launch template. Right. And, the way that we always do these is we have a description. We have a parameters section, which we'll leave blank for the time being. We have a resources section, and we'll have an output section just to demonstrate it. I think we'll probably end up with a mapping section here too. I can't remember if it's mapping. I think it's mappings. Okay. So let's get in and we'll just start building this out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create, we'll just call it demo launch template. So this is our logical identifier. And then we know the type is AWS EC2 launch template. And then we're going to find a bunch of properties. If we look at our documentation here, we know that we're going to need launch template data with a bunch of items here. And then, do we care about a launch template name? Let's have a look. It's not required. So I'm going to leave the launch template name out because a lot of times I just let CloudFormation name this. Okay, so it'll create a dynamic name for us, and we do want tag specifications, and we'll just mark this as to do as well. So that's our launch template. Not going to do much, but in theory, it's built. So here we go. Let's go through this device, or this list of attributes. The first thing we have to think about are block device maps. So these are ways to associate one or more EBS volumes to the EC2 instance that we're launching. And we know that we're going to get a root volume by default. And then we can add any additional volumes that we would like. Right? That makes sense. I think for today, we are gonna make some changes to our block device mappings, okay? And then we've got to do here. And what I'm going to do is I always forget. So we're going to go back over here and we actually are going to launch this. None of this really matters, okay? Got my VPC. Again, this is really, I'm going to show you why I want to do this. Okay, that's probably fine. Like I said, I just need this to come to life for just a couple minutes. The reason that I want this machine is if we go when we look at the block device map here, it needs a bunch of information. The device name, EBS info, virtual names, and I can never remember what these device name paths are. And I'm sure I could look it up in the documentation somewhere, but this is easier. So we're just going to go here. We're going to go and we're going to look at storage. Here's our device. There's our device name. That's literally all I needed this for. Okay, so we're going to go back here and we're going to say device name. And in this case, it's, I already forget. Right, so this is our root volume. Okay. Now you can imagine here, if you had other volumes that you wanted to associate to this machine when you launched it, you could go ahead and make these changes. For today, we're going to keep it simple. And we're just going to create this one device. Okay. Delete on termination. So we do want to delete this, make sure that it gets deleted on termination. So we'll say true. We do want it to be encrypted, so we'll say true. Now we need to provide it with the KMS key ID. We'll come back to that one in a second. We're gonna build a new machine, so we don't need, or a new volume. We don't need a snapshot ID. Now this is the part that I can't quite recall. We're gonna use a GP3 device, so that's the latest generation of general purpose SSD drives. Now the default is 8 gig. We're gonna make it a little bigger. Let's just make a number up. We'll make it 20 gig, and then we'll set the volume type to GP3. Now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna have a quick look at what we just deployed. I remember I did this before, and I thought for GP3, see here, the throughput to provision a GP3 volume with the maximum of 1,000 megabits per second, and then we have a range. And I always mess this up. So what I want to do is go back over here. Let's go have a look at this. Does it give us the throughput info in here? So the throughput is 125. So that's the minimum. I'm going to try that. Okay. I can't remember. Last time we did this, we had to set it. There's a ratio, and I'm not sure if I'm mixing that up with GP2 or GP3. So we'll try this and see what it does. And then we mentioned that we wanted to encrypt this drive at by default. We're going to use the built-in key here, and this is the default encryption key that we've got set up. So I'm just going to reference that right in there, right? And I'm not going to worry about a parameter. You know what? Let's make this a little more flexible. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an intrinsic function to do this. Let's try this again. Because right now I've got this completely hard-coded, so not really very flexible. So what I'm going to do is, what if I wanted to deploy this in a different region? So now I could say AWS, that's region, right? So it's going to populate these for us on the fly. And then we'll say AWS account ID. And we'll take it a step further, and we'll go like this. Okay, so now you can specify the particular key ID, and that'll be our first parameter. So I'll just say key ID type is string. Okay. And as I go through this, we'll make sure that we have all of these set in our CI script. So we're going to go back here, and we're going to say key ID, and really all we need here to construct this is that value. And we'll say and I know I'm missing something here, so I'm going to add it before we try to deploy anything. Okay, so that's that first piece. So what we've got here, if I've got all this correct, is we've created a block device map for our root volume, right? And then provided the configuration information about that root volume. So that's good. We're going to shrink that down just to keep this relatively sane. Okay. And let's continue through our list. We won't worry about capacity. We won't worry about CPU, credit. This we do want. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have EBS. And I don't even know if you need this in the type of EC2 instance we're going to use, like a latest generation one. This is probably okay. Like it's already set for us. But we're going to put it in our template just in case. We don't need GPU, don't need any of this. Now, this is our first bit of supporting info, right? Some extra things. So we're going to say IAM instance profile. We're just going to put a placeholder in here for now. So I'll say to do. Image ID. And we will fix this now. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a map for this, because I want to create a template that we could use across multiple regions. And remember that a machine image, an AMI, is bound to a specific AWS region. So we need to figure out, we need to understand which region we're running in and which AMI to use. I know you can get this programmatically, but for today, we're going to keep it simple. And we're going to create a really simple little map. So we'll call this our AMI map, and we'll say for CA Central-1. Okay, and we'll just go, we'll just call it AMI ID, and I'm going to grab this from the console. Again, we can do this in a bunch of different ways. And we're just going to use, really simple again. We're going to take this guy right here. Okay, so that's the machine image ID for CA Central 1. And then just to show you how this would work, we could do this, and we could jump over to US East 1. And you would lay this map out for every region that you want to operate in, and we'll grab the machine image ID for that. And we'll dump that here. Okay. So that's our really simple map, right? We'll go back to Canada just to make sure we don't get confused. And then in this case, we need to use an intrinsic function. So we're going to say find in map. And I can never remember the structure of this, so it might be here. Let's see an example. Oh, there it is. Okay. So what we've got is we've got the first thing is the name of our map. So in our case, it's AMI map. And then we need the region that we're running in. So AWS, this is kind of the second level. And then we need whatever we called the value. So in our case, it's just AMI ID. So that way, if we run this template in CA Central 1, US East 1, it picks up the AMI. Now we're just using an Amazon provided AMI. Typically we'd have a custom AMI built out with whatever you need. Okay, but keep it easy. We'll do that. So that's machine, shutdown, market, requirements. Our instance type we also need. And we're going to refer to, again, another parameter. And we're going to go up here and we're just going to say instance type. And we'll say string. We'll set a default value for this and we'll just make it, we'll do T3 small. And then what we're going to do is provide a list of allowed values. Okay, so we'll do these. What this means is if we were deploying this through the console, if the user went into the CloudFormation console, they'd see that as the default value, but have a drop-down list that shows them all three of these. Okay. We're going to do this programmatically, so we would just simply override this with our CLI command if we wanted to. But this should do the trick for today. So that's our instance type. Kernel key name. So Amazon has a new recommendation in Security Hub that they suggest not using keys, right? EC2 key pairs with your EC2 instances. We're going to follow that advice, but let me just have a look at what happens here. Yeah, so it's not required. If you do not specify key pair, you cannot connect to the instance unless you choose an AMI that is configured to allow users to log in another way. We're going to figure out another way to log into this machine. Okay? So generally, we would put these machines in some sort of directory service or something like that. I'm going to try this today as a way to keep a Security Hub finding from flagging this machine and saying, hey, you shouldn't put EC2 key pairs. So we're going to leave that one blank and just test it out. So that's our key name, license, maintenance, metadata. This is another thing that we are going to add. So metadata, remember, I call it like a balance sheet. It's a point-in-time configuration of this machine. So we can run, like if we have access to this EC2 instance on the command line, we could run a curl command and look at the metadata and understand how the machine is configured. There are two versions of metadata, version 1 and version 2. Amazon recommends that you use version 2. So we're going to configure this machine to use version 2 of the metadata. Again, this will stop if you're running Security Hub in your environment, which you should be. It will stop Security Hub from flagging this as not using version 2 of metadata. So let's set that up. It's relatively easy again. So what we need here is we just need this one setting. HTTP tokens are optional or required. In version 2, we can force it to be required, and that should keep the Security Hub finding happy. So we're just going to put that one line in. HTTP tokens are required in order to talk to metadata. So what this means is essentially you have to get a token first, and then you can use that token to authenticate against the metadata call. That's all it's going to do. So that's that piece. Let's go back up to the main list here. Monitoring is something we want to add. Let's have a look at what our options are here. Yeah, we just want to, basically this is going to enable detailed monitoring. So by default, CloudWatch will monitor this every 5 minutes. If I'm remembering this correctly, if we go over here and have a look, this should collect metric data every minute. There is an additional cost for this. So see here, data is available in 1-minute periods. Okay, but now we're also going to incur some additional charges. I'm going to turn this on because I want the additional metric data. And we'd often do this in a launch template situation because the launch templates are often used with autoscaling. And I might want more detailed information coming off of the instances that are part of my autoscaling group in order to make scaling decisions. So in our case, we're just going to say monitoring enabled true. Okay. And then scroll back to the top here. Network interfaces, we won't worry about that. We're not going to worry about placement groups, no private DNS. Security groups, RAM disk ID, we don't need to worry about. So this is our next to do. So we're going to say security group IDs, and we'll come back to this in a bit. Tag specifications. So we've got 2 tag specifications set up. This tag specification will be the tags that are applied to the resource, in this case, the EC2 instance that we're deploying. This tag specification will be the tags that are associated to the launch template itself. So we want both. So we're going to go in here, and I always forget the structure of this. So let's just have a look at it. Oops. We'll fix that in a minute. Okay, so resource type is the first thing we have to define, and in this case, it's just going to be instance, right? Because we're deploying instances here. Okay. And then we need to define the tags. And in our case, we're going to do something like this. I always forget this. It's key, name, and then the value is to do. And for now, I'm just going to set up 2 tags. So there's another value that we've set. So we're going to go back up here. We're going to say environment, type is string, and we're going to do the same thing that we did before. So we'll say the default is development, cloud values, our development, we'll just make 2 for now in production. So those are our tags. This I'm going to set sort of dynamically, okay? And we're going to use an intrinsic function again. We're going to use the sub command here. So I'm going to do something like this. And we're going to say okay. Try, oh boy, bad keyboard mapping. Okay, let's try that the 400th time. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to, again, when this runs in CloudFormation, we provide it with a stack name. So whatever we call this, and then the environment. Okay. So that's essentially what we're going to see the name in the console as, and then the environment. Okay, so that's that. That's pretty much, I think we've covered sort of the kind of common things you'll see. Okay, and then user data. So user data is a way to run a command or script against this machine when the first time it comes to life. Okay, so the first time we boot an EC2 instance off of this template, launch template, we could run a command. So quite often, maybe you've got like, could we run one of these? I like to leave tag specifications to the end. So let's just do this. Does it give us a sample of a user data? I always forget the config of this. There's a specific way to set this up. Let's see if we go over to EC2 instance. And they give you some basic examples. Does it give us a user data script? It doesn't look like it does. Well, I won't worry about it today because I'm going to mess the syntax of this up. I'd have to look it up. But as an example, if this is a Linux machine, we could do something like yum update. To run a patch operation on the EC2 instance the first time it comes to life. For now, we're going to leave that blank. If I go back over to launch templates, and we need this tag specification at the top. So let's have a look at this one. I think it's exactly the same. Yeah, So we need resource type. And in this case, we need, there's a bunch of things here, right? To tag the launch template, then we need to use launch dash template. Launch dash template. And we'll say tags. And we'll say key. We'll just put a single tag in here, and we'll say value is ref environment begin. Like that. We're still missing a couple things here. We're going to fill these in next. And then we've put an output section. So outputs are important because a lot of times, we're not going to do it today, but a lot of times we're going to have, output from one template can become input for another template, whether you're using nested stacks or cross stack references. So we'd often put these in as kind of almost placeholders, right? Because we might need this info in the future. So if we look at this launch template and we open this up, we can go to one level too deep. We can go here and see here are the return values. So in this case, if we use a ref, it just gives us the logical ID. If we use another intrinsic function, get attribute, we can look at the version number or the latest version. What I'm going to do is we'll keep it simple for today, and we'll just say, let's go launch template ID. Right, we'll say the value is ref demo launch template. And a lot of times we tend to use cross stack references. So we are going to export a value. We're going to export that value into a particular name. So we're going to use sub again. We're going to say AWS. Oops, sorry. And I'll just do LT-ID. Okay, so what's the logical ID of the launch template? So that's what we're doing here. Now we're missing a few little pieces. So let's build these out. For today, I'm going to put them right in this template. Normally, I would separate this. So I would have a template for all my IAM resources. I'd have another template for all my security group resources. But to keep it simple, we're going to do it like this today and put everything in one template. Okay. So the first thing is we need this instance profile set up. Remember that an instance profile is a way that we can associate an IAM role to an EC2 instance. So we need to set that piece up, and we need to go and look at the docs for this. Now, where is IAM? There we go. And if we look, what happened there? Let's get rid of that. Go under IAM. Here's the instance profile. So we'll start with that. So we'll just call this instance profile, very creative name. We'll define its type. We won't give it a name again. It's not required. We'll let CloudFormation name it for us. Path, we don't care about. The roles. So this is actually how we associate the role with the EC2 instance. So we're going to say roles. Is it I think it's a list. Yeah. So we'll say like this. Okay. So you can see how this is going to, got a couple other things. What I'm also going to do here is we're going to use a depends on setting down here because for this launch template to successfully deploy, it now needs this instance profile. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here and we're going to say depends on, and then put the logical name in. What this is going to do is it's going to control the order in which resources are deployed. So without this, we may have, what will happen is CloudFormation will try to deploy everything in parallel. Makes sense, right? Because you can imagine with very large templates, you want to speed up the deployment process as much as you can to get those infrastructure components up and running, and you can start working. But in certain cases, you need to order. You need to tell CloudFormation the order in which things need to be deployed. This depends on these other resources. Let's make sure those resources are there first. So that's what we're doing here. It might not be required in this situation, but I like to use it as a way just to control this. Okay, so that's that. Now down here, let's fill in this blank first before we go too far. I got to find EC2 again here. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, so let's go launch template. And we know it's in here. I just need to get the syntax. What is it expecting? So if I go here, okay, we can decide what we want to pass it. We can pass it the ARN, right? The Amazon resource name, the unique identifier for, in this case, the launch template, or we can pass it the name. I'm going to go the ARN path. So we're going to say ARN, and we need to get this value. And this is where we can go back to IAM, and we want to look at the return value for the instance profile. Okay. What's going on here? What am I doing wrong? Oh, sorry. This is what we want. Okay, so we want to look at the return value, and we know in this case we're expecting, or it's expecting an ARN. So we can look here and we can see how we get this, right? So now we can use the get attribute intrinsic function, use the logical reference for this dot ARN. So now this is going to pass the ARN for the instance profile that we created here. So that's our first to do done, but we've added another one. So let's figure this one out. We need to create a role that we'll use and associate to this instance profile. So let's do that. I'm going to actually make this first. We're going to say instance role. So we're going to do the same thing. We'll say depends on instance role. Okay. We'll come back and figure out what this needs in a second. So let's go over here and look at the role. What do we need? The first thing is we need to create an assume role policy document. So what this does is this controls who or what can assume this role. In this case, we want the EC2 instance service to be able to assume this role. There'll be an example here that we can use. So let's scroll down right here. This is actually exactly what we need. So we're going to say version is 2012 1017, and a really simple statement is effect. Okay, that's it. So what this is saying is allow this service to assume this role. This is what we're doing here is we're creating the trust policy. Who or what can assume this role? That's that first part. The next thing is we need to decide what permissions, once the EC2 service, there we go, has assumed this role, what permissions should it have? Okay? And the way that we do that is with manage policy ARNs. We're going to use a managed policy. You could create your own custom managed policy, but we're going to use an Amazon provided one. So let's just put a description here so we remember what this is. Okay, so this is the IAM role used for our launch template demo session. Okay. And then we're going to say managed policy ARNs. And we're just going to give it one permission. If we go back over here and we go to IAM, remember I said we need another way to get access to this machine since we're not setting up a key pair. So we're going to go over to policies and we're going to look in here and we're going to look for SSM. And SSM has a bunch of roles, but a bunch of permissions. We really just need this one. And all we need here is this ARN. And we can plunk that in there. Okay. And we don't have to really worry about this because IAM is a global service. This is an Amazon managed policy. So we can just hard code this. It's going to look the same in every single AWS account. And you'll notice the description right here. So this is an EC2 role to enable AWS Systems Services Core Functionality, and you can see the list of permissions, right? If I recall the documentation properly or enough, this should give us enough access to run the session manager against this machine and get access to it that way rather than having to use SSH. So that's all we need here. And let me go back to the documentation. We do support tags, so we're going to do the same thing. We could hard code a name here, but again, we're just going to let Amazon do that for us, CloudFormation. So we'll do the same thing that we've done throughout here. We're going to say key is environment, and the value is ref environment. You can put as many tags in here as you want. Like I think the current number now is there's a limit of 250 customer tags, I think. So you can come up with whatever you want. Like normally we would have like an owner tag. We'd have an owner email tag. So how do you get a hold of the person that owns this resource? And then the environment or whatever else we wanted. So we'll keep it simple today and do that. So that's our role. Okay. Now we have to associate this role to the instance profile. So we'll go back to the, actually, let's do, yeah, I don't know if it needs an ARN or not. So let's have a look here. So this is the name of the role that you want to associate with the instance profile. So if we go back over here and we look at the return values, we just need a ref, right? Because this returns the resource name. So we can just do this. Ref instance role. Okay. So that gets rid of this first, where was it? Right here. If we've got this all done correctly, we create a role. We associate that role with the instance profile, and then during the deployment of the launch template, we can now associate that instance profile with this EC2 instance. So, and that should give it permissions with SSM. So the last thing that we're missing is a security group. So let's create a security group. We're going to go here and we're going to put in another depends on, right? Because we need to make sure this security group is deployed before this is done. And then let's jump over back to EC2 and we can get a really simple, where is it? There it is. Security group built. All right, so we need a group description. Now let's do this. Okay. We won't give it a group name. We'll let CloudFormation do that for us. And now we need to think about the egress and ingress rules. All we're going to do in this case is we're going to set, I don't even know if we need to do this. I think we can get away with actually leaving no rules here at all, because remember, we'll see very quickly, but remember that a security group is an example of a stateful firewall. And by default, it allows all outbound traffic and no inbound traffic. So that means if our EC2 instance was to initiate an outbound connection, then the response back should be allowed back through the security group. So I'm going to leave this completely empty for the time being. And we're just going to say, oh, here's something we need, VPC ID. I'm just gonna hard code the ID here. Remember I was mentioning earlier on that a lot of times we use this idea of cross stack references. Generally, I would have a VPC stack which outputs the logical ID of the VPC that we created. I can't quite remember what we've done in the demo account here. So to play it safe, I'm going to use a parameter for this instead, and we can just pass it in. If I was doing this in a real deployment, we take the export value of the VPC and import it into this template using the import value intrinsic function. So we'll just go like this. And again, just to kind of work through this as we go, we'll go VPC ID. And we'll put in our placeholder. And we'll add it down here too. We'll come back and see if we can figure out what we need there. So that's our VPC ID, because remember, security groups are associated to a particular security group, right? So we need that. And then again, we'll just set up a really simple tag just to demonstrate again how this works. Okay, perfect. So that's our security group. I don't know if it'll work for what we need, but it's a security group. We can always adjust it. Great to start with least privilege, right? Now we need to refer to it here, and we get an indication of what it's expecting. It says ID right in the name. So we can go back over here and look at return values, group ID, VPC ID. So we need this. So we can go right here and say get attribute. What did we call it? Demo security group dot group ID. Okay, so that should pass in the group ID from here. And remember, we can associate multiple EC2 instances, or not multiple EC2 instances, sorry. We can associate multiple security groups with a single EC2 instance. So you could have a list here if you had other requirements. I think, in theory, we have a template here that should be deployable, but let's see what happens. Oh, we need the VPC ID before we do anything else. So we go over here. I think it said we had a VPC still deployed here. I'm hoping we do. Okay. And here's my demo VPC, and we need this VPC ID. Okay. And we need to put that here. Okay. So the one thing that we're missing here is the actual EC2 instance, right? All we're doing is we're creating a template to launch an EC2 instance at some point in the future. But I think at this point we'll stop with this. We've got about 14 minutes left here. I want to try to keep this to an hour. So we'll keep this simple for the time being. And maybe what we can do is, if we can get through this bug check here and make sure this actually works, if we have time, we can go back and add a simple declaration down here about the actual EC2 instance. So let's run this. In theory, this should have everything that we need, except for one thing. I think it's just capability IAM. So why do we have to put this here? If you're deploying, so if you've deployed CloudFormation templates before through the console, if a CloudFormation template has IAM resources defined within it, then you need to, in the console, click a button that says you agree that CloudFormation is going to deploy IAM resources on your behalf. If you're doing it programmatically, you need to do the same thing. You have two options here. You have capability IAM or capability named IAM. Okay? The difference is, if you put names in your IAM resources, then you need capability named IAM. In our case, we didn't do that. We're going to let CloudFormation do that for us, so we can get away with that. If you tried to deploy this without this capabilities option, the CloudFormation deploy command would fail. Okay, it would come back and say, you need the capabilities statement in order for this to run. Essentially what you're doing is you're checking that box that you would see in the management console. All right, so let's see how lucky we get here. I'm going to check this in. Okay. And there we go. Now, did I leave this open? I did. Go over here. And let's see what happens. Okay, it didn't fail immediately, which is good. Maybe it'll fail. Okay, great. So we ran, all we did is, if we go back here, this is really basic, right? All this is doing is CloudFormation validate is a CLI command that does some really basic syntax checking, validation of parameters, things like that you've provided. By no means is it telling you that this template is actually deployable, but it passes some basic syntax. And you can actually see, look at, the deploy actually failed. So we passed the validation, but when we tried to deploy the template, it failed. So let's see what's wrong with it. I missed something here. Tag 0, tag 1. Environment, did I spell everything right? That looks okay. I've got a default value set for that. Tags 0 and 1. So that means that we've got something that's got 2 tag values on it. Right in here, maybe? This is not a super helpful error message. VPC ID, let me just make sure I passed that incorrectly. VPC, parameter overrides, key ID, VPC ID, so that's fine. Huh. Okay, so that looks good. That looks good. So we've got AWS stack name and environment. This is the only place where we've got 2 values that are getting passed, right? I'm thinking because it says tag 0 value, tag 1 value, and it's expecting something, and it's saying that the parameters that are getting passed in are, well, 0 in length. So what have we done wrong? It's a shame this won't tell us what resource is incorrect. So we're going to do something extreme, but it'll help us test this very quickly. Okay, so we're just going to say fix testing tagging issue. What I'm really doing is I'm just trying to quickly determine where the problem is, right? So if this still errors out, then we know it's not the tag values that we applied to our launch template. If it passes here, if it actually deploys, then we know it's something in those tag specifications. No, it's still errored on us. So what have we got wrong here? Key value, ref environment. Oh, look. No, environment. Yeah, we got that spelt right. Make sure that the spacing is correct. Yeah, we've got that right. Okay, so let's take it a step further. Key, oh wait. Key, okay, no, we're not using that. And we've passed that in here, right? Key ID, VPC. Yeah, let's keep removing things until we figure out what's wrong. With these types of error messages, sometimes troubleshooting of this can be a little frustrating. Let's see what it does. Still doesn't like it. I got something messed up in here, maybe? So let's do this. Maybe I've got a typo in my deploy command. I thought I cut and pasted that. So let's have a look here. So running the deploy command, parameter dash overrides. Yeah, that's fine. What have we messed up here? We've got stack name, profile, owner, environments all defined. We've set, okay, so let's put all this back. And we've got VPC ID, our key ID. I'm wondering if I've messed one of these up. No, I don't think so. Key ID. Okay. Let's go like this. I don't know if we did this already, but now we're down to just our role. Okay. See if we can figure out what the heck is going on here. It's going to be something silly at this point. Type string default. Still failed. Okay, now I'm really confused. To me, that means we've got something in here in the actual deploy command wrong then. Because at this point, we've got nothing left in here. So let's go back and look at our CI script again. Oh, I see it. Sorry, bad cut and paste. See these two things right here? Owner equals stack owner, owner email equals. These are those values that I talked about before. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this. I see it now. And yeah, I shortened these names. So we'll just say owner equals owner. So this is tagging the stack itself. Okay, I'm hoping that's what the issue was, because the template itself looks pretty good. Let's do it again. I think that's all it was. I'm hoping that's all it was. Okay, we actually let's do this. And we want to tag the stack as well with an environment variable. Okay, that looks better. That's all it was. All right, perfect. So this deployed, but I'm going to push this again with that additional tag on the stack. Because it won't take very long. And what we do here is we're actually, you'll notice right here, we're creating change sets. So if you're not familiar with a change set, think of a change set as a dry run. It lets you understand what would be deployed or potentially what would be updated and the effects of those updates before actually doing it. So if we go over now to the CloudFormation console, we should have a stack. Here's our launch template demo stack, and we have a couple change sets. Right, so it's going to wait for us to actually approve this. So we can look here. This is pretty basic because it's going to add a whole bunch of new resources. Our launch template, our security group, our instance profile, and our role. Let's deploy it and see what happens. Hopefully it goes here. I'm not going to be surprised if it fails. Just the nature of the beast sometimes on these first deploys. Okay, so progress. Our security group deployed successfully. The easiest resource that we have. There's our instance profile. So now we have our role. Profiles created. So you can see now we're kind of waiting on the launch template, right? Hopefully there's no spelling mistakes. Oh, that's not a good sign. Maybe it hasn't gotten there yet. Not quite yet. Doesn't like the instance profile. Here's our security groups. We've got a bunch of them in here. I should do some cleanup in here. There's our demo security group, right? Inbound, nothing inbound, and it allows all outbound traffic. I'm not sure why the instance profile is taking so long. It's pretty basic, right? Patience, I guess, is the key here. If we go over to IAM and we go to Can you see it in here? Because it's, yeah, we should be able to see our instance role. So there's our instance role. So there's the trust relationship. There's the permissions that are assigned to it. So that looks good. Okay, there we go. Just took a little while. So now this is the tricky part. This is the launch template. Let's see what happens. Worked. Okay, great. So now if we go to EC2 and we go under launch templates, here's our newly created launch template. So remember, I just let CloudFormation dynamically create these names. So there's its unique ID and there's the name that it created, our version and our latest version. If we open this up, you can see all the kind of details that we provided. There's the machine image we want, the instance type, the security group. Here's our storage config. So we changed it to 20 gigs using GP3. We're going to encrypt that volume by default. Here are the tags that we're going to associate to that instance. Network interfaces we didn't worry about. And in here, you know, we've enabled a couple of these features. There's our metadata. So what I could do from here is I could say actions, launch an instance from the template, and you get timed out. Let's try that again. Okay, so if we go back to EC2, we go back to launch templates. Where was it? Here it is. Action, launch a template. So you'll notice now we've got our launch template, our version. So if we had multiple versions, we could select the version that we wanted. And then all of this is pre-populated for us. Okay. I'm not quite sure why that is empty. This is not populated. So we need to tell it where we actually want to deploy this. So I'm just going to put it in one of the private subnets in our VPC, but it's already selected the security group for us. Okay. Here's the volume config, so you can see all those details. And then here are our tags, setup tags. And if we open up the advanced details, you'll notice there's our instance profile associated already. So you can see now we don't have a lot to select, right? Really all I did was I selected the subnet. Okay, so it simplifies the deployment. And if I've got this all correct, oh, here we go. An IOPS value is required. Please specify an IOPS value. Okay, so I missed something there. I'm not sure what that value is supposed to be. Hang on one second. Maybe this is the one that I was thinking about on the range piece. That's not going to help us much here. So there's our volume size. There's our max IOPS. So here's the volume size are smaller or equal to 170, maximum throughput of 128. We put 125, so that's fine. So what's it expecting here? Okay. Well, you know what? Just to see this work, we're going to override it and make it GP3 for the or GP2. Okay. I'll figure out what I've done wrong there, and we'll repost this with the solution for that. I'm not sure what I've done there. Actually, we deployed GP3 already, didn't we? When we did that simple one. So let's go back over here. We left that one machine running, and we can go to storage. We can look at this. What are the specs for this? IOPS 3000. Okay. Let's change that back. Where was it? So we can go GP3 3000. Okay, so that's set its default. So we can change that in the template. There we go. Okay. Now, while we're waiting for that to launch, what we could do is we could go back over here. So we needed IOPS. I think it's just like that, and we could just hard code it, or you could make that like a value again that you pass in. Okay, so we'll say this, fix added missing. Okay. And in the meantime, there's our EC2 instance coming to life. Okay, so that's an example of using a launch template to set up or simplify the deployment of EC2 instances by pre-populating a lot of the properties that you have to set when launching an instance. And we did it in just over an hour. So thanks very much for tuning in, everybody. We'll call it here, and we'll be back. We're going to try to do this again next Wednesday over the lunch hour and write some more CloudFormation. So take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.